Hi, I'm Teresa Cleveland, and I'm recording today's episode of Your Daily Dose of Hope. So, I'm going to share a story that stayed with me for years, and then I'll tell you a little bit about it at the end. Years ago, when my now adult granddaughter was about 4 or 5 years old, we had one of those magical grandma granddaughter afternoons. And she was always such a water baby, and she'd been swimming in the pool. And I was sitting on the deck holding a book more than I really was reading it while watching her swim. And eventually she climbed out of the pool and wandered over. We chatted for a minute or so, and then I asked her a question. I said, Jersey, what if I told you that you could kick the sky? Now, she looked at me and she looked up at the big blue sky and then back at me and said, Really? Nobody can kick the sky. And I said, Sure, you can. I learned how when I was just about your age. When you're out there on the swing set and you're swinging and you get going really high, you go up and back. And when you feel like you're in that spot, I said, then when you are on your way back up, you just tilt back a little bit and point your toes. And when you reach the top, you just give it a kick. And she laughed like I had no idea what I was talking about. And then we went on talking about more important 4 to 5 year old things, like she wanted to know what kind of fish I would be if I could be a fish, and so on. A few minutes later, she went out into the yard. She was playing, and I saw her meandering around, and she was making her way towards the swing set. And she was trying not to be obvious. And so I picked up my book and pretended like I was reading, and I was watching her over the top of it. And sure enough, she climbed up on the swing and she started swinging, and she was pumping her little legs to get up a good height for a little girl her age. And I watched as she went up and back, and then she seemed to find her spot. And then I just watched her as she went up and back, and she began to get into position. I watched as she went up and back, and then she began to position herself for this great feat ahead of her. She got the tilt locked in, her toes were pointing as she started the ascent, and then came the cutest little pat as she flexed her foot towards the sky. And she shouted, and her voice was full of pride and joy. And she said, Grandma, I did it. I really kicked the sky. And of course, we celebrated with a hug and a popsicle. That afternoon and that lesson has always it was like a lesson in action, and it stayed with me all these years for two reasons. One being the what if, right? Opening the door to possibility. It opened her mind and gave her a challenge, which turned into the hope that she could actually accomplish something she had never even thought of before. And the second thing was that by tilting back just a little bit, it changed her whole perspective just enough while doing something that she did all the time, that she was then able to experience the exhilaration and pride that came with it. And I know that personally, I could apply those two things more often in my life. And today I just wanted to share this and hope that everyone listening can remember, regardless of the circumstances, whether it feels like, how am I going to get through this? Or, oh boy, this is what's being served up today, that we could remember to ask, what if, that, and open that possibility and uncover the hope that lies within.